Sure, let's go.
Okay. I guess I want to ask one thing about the mission, which is that there's been a lot of back and forth about how AMISOM, for example, is compensated. And there have been some complaints by Uganda in terms of equipment. And I just wanted to know, from your point of view as the UN person there, what steps are undertaken to make sure that the peacekeeping force that's there remains in place, and what would be the downside if, for example, either Burundians left or the people said that we're not getting paid enough and we're leaving?
The issue of payment for TCCs is results from the EU decision, which has long been flagged to cut 20% of the funding. For the African Union, it is important that the UN contributes to efforts to compensate for that gap, but the Security Council, I do not see the likelihood of payment for AU coming from assessed contributions, which means that other ways need to be found to compensate for that 20% shortfall. And they can include an effort by the UN to work with an AU-led campaign to raise the money on the grounds, as the Europeans would have it, that security in Somalia is not just a European responsibility, it's in the interest of the entire international community. And so certainly we are ready as the UN to help the African Union to do that, should they wish us to help them do so.
I'm hoping there are other questions, but I'd asked UK Deputy Peter Wilson on his way in about the situation of Somaliland, and he'd said that it might come up in consultations, that it's complex. Did not come up?
Not really, no. I mean, the issue of Somaliland's representation in the Somalia electoral model came up, but not the issue of Somaliland-Somalia politics as such.
I guess because I know your predecessor, Nicholas K., had gone up there a number of times. There have been a number of issues around airspace. Have you, I mean, what's your sense of the there's a petition out there, whatever you may think of it, asking for recognition as an independent state. Where do things stand in terms of either being integrated or that aspiration continuing?
I mean, Somaliland is very clear that it sees itself as an independent state, but that is not recognized either by the African Union or by the UN or by anybody else. So we have a strange situation in which Somalia considers Somaliland to be part of Somalia, and Somaliland does not recognize itself as part of Somalia. I've been up to Hargeisa and was very warmly received, and was asked to, play a more, as it were, active role in following some of these issues, and certainly plan to do so. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about if you can say anything on sanctions issues. I know that there's some requesting that the sanctions on Eritrea, for example, in the past for having supported al-Shabaab, be raised, and there's also issues around Somalia sanctions. Did this come up? And even if it didn't, what's your view of the do you see any evidence, for example, of Eritrea supporting al-Shabaab at this time?
It did not come up, and I have seen no evidence of Eritrea supporting al-Shabaab, no.
As a UN person, what's the rationale for the sanctions?
The sanctions are to prevent, illicit weapons flows into Somalia, financial flows, and so on. They're not exclusively limited to, in the case of Somalia, either to Eritrea or to al-Shabaab.
While you've been in New York, have you met with the new resident coordinator of the UN system in Kenya,
no.
Mr. Chatterjee?
No.
Okay. And the other one has to do with whether President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, is he still the president? I mean, some people have written and said his mandate expired, that's why he didn't speak in the GA. What's this legal status?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked into this, had lawyers, both Somali and international, looking into it. And essentially, the basic problem is that the provisional constitution of Somalia is not very clear about this situation. And to cut a long story short, the way it's being handled is that with the announcement of a new deadline for the electoral process and for the presidential election, he continues to serve in a caretaker capacity until there is a successor. The alternative, namely that he issues a decree extending himself, would not be politically acceptable, nor is it feasible to get the Parliament to issue such a decree. So of the various legal and constitutional tools for dealing with this situation, none is ideal. So essentially, de facto, he remains president until the new one is selected. But it is understood that we are now in a moratorium period in which no major decisions, barring national security related, will be taken under his term of office.
So the foreign minister's speech was, I'm just wondering, some people tied this to who would actually, write or deliver, or the speech that was given in the General Assembly debate. Is there any interplay between this moratorium and that?
The foreign minister's speech?
No, I mean, I'm just saying, if there's a problem, if there's an issue legally around who is the government,
yeah,
does that impact who speaks in the hall? I was here when he did.
No,
speak.
I mean, I think the executive remains in place, and as the foreign minister of the federal government, he continues to represent that administration. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you.